finally got some time to do this. So without further ado, let's go on r/MapPorn and look at the top posts of the last 7 days and see what I can say about each of these maps. Okay, so first we have another map by Atlasova, except this one appears to be humorous, which is good because their serious maps are usually extremely inaccurate, as we saw in previous videos. So, innocent opinions that divide nations. Okay, so this one is going to require a zoom in. Let's see. Okay, so do you hit your companions in a sauna with a vichta or a vasta? Okay. What side do you put butter on your knäckebröd? Should the Christmas soda be red or brown? Should you put, should borscht be with smetana or without? I've never actually heard of anyone preferring borscht without smetana. I'm not from Ukraine, but at least like in Russia, you always add smetana. So where is Mont Saint-Michel located? I thought it was on that island in Normandy. I guess we'll see which camp I fall into, I suppose. Edapfel or Kartoffel, however you say that. I guess. I mean, those are just like regional dialects. The French one is not. The French one is what's it called? The pain au chocolat or chocolatine. I think it's like which. I mean, there's probably a lot of these. Calling fries patate or frite, chippy sauce or ketchup on fish and chips. What is chippy sauce? Whatever chippy sauce is, that's what I want. I want chippy sauce. I don't want ketchup. Ketchup is boring. Syrnik should be with raisins or without. Syrnik sounds like it sounds like syrnik in Russian. So like a sweet cheesecake type of thing, like a cottage cheese cake. Which beer is better, Zagres or Super Bock? I haven't really heard of either of them, so I don't know. I don't know what the great omelet debate is. Okay, so I think it's clear that we need to look at the comments here. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's see. The great omelet. I wish they would just do like let's sort by controversial, just because I'm feeling feisty today. Black Pete, Zwarte Pete, okay. Patat. Okay, never mind. I guess okay. All the downvoted or the 50-50 comments are all like bad comments, basically. Okay, top. What's the difference between best and top? That's what I'm wondering. Okay, in France, except for the Bretons and Normans, nobody cares about the exact location. The pain au chocolat, chocolatine, was the obvious choice in this map for France. Okay, so I'm glad that my understanding of French culture is somewhat accurate. The West Germanic languages only have potato-based disputes. That's kind of funny. That's actually an interesting observation, right? The Scottish one, the patat, the adapfel, potato salad. Vedat Milor, the most famous Turkish food critic, made an opinion poll about the menemen dispute. 51% onion, 49% without onion. Okay, so yeah, so people are very protective about their dishes. Let's see, Aldi Nord or Aldi Sud. Is that well, there is actually a map of that. Okay, I'll throw that on the video. How dare you? What's the great omelet debate? Spanish omelet is made with eggs and potatoes, but some people put onions. So with onions or without onions? I mean, I've made both types of omelets, and I guess I prefer onions. I feel like they add some extra flavor, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, is this really like, yeah, okay. I suppose, yeah, food is very serious business, especially in Europe. Keeping their toaster in the cupboard? Protestants, I'm not joking, the typical split. I don't know anyone in the Republic who keeps it in a cupboard, but Protestants in Northern Ireland are infamous for keeping their toaster in a cupboard. What? That baffles me. I'm with the Catholics on this one. It's obviously pronounced scone and not. Is it like scoon? Scone? Scoon? I mean, again, the linguistic ones are kind of stupid because that's just like, do you say you guys or do you say y'all? I mean, that's no longer, I guess it used to be a regional thing, but now like woke people say y'all, so it's kind of a weird. Belgium is empty. Die or das Nutella for Germany. Die or das Nutella, and should it be eaten with butter or not? I feel like Nutella would be feminine, so which one is that? Is that die or das? I don't know. I forget. Wichta is the Western word, and the subjectively better, and Vasta is Eastern. The divide is basically dialectal, and we could find hundreds of examples to replace Wichta and Vasta. Okay, yeah, so, well, anyway, this is fun. I don't know. I'm not extremely knowledgeable about any of this stuff, so this doesn't really mean anything to me. Most common means of transportation to work by county. Okay, this map is very popular on Twitter for obvious reasons. The obvious reason being that Twitter has a very strong pro-public transit and anti-car community. I mean, it shows that, so with the exception, you can't even see, this is a terrible map, but you actually can't see it at all. But I'm pretty sure San Francisco County, which is the same as the city, San Francisco. I guess that's Manhattan, which is New York County, I think is technically the name of it. And something else, I forget, some other, Washington, D.C. Those are the only three places where public transportation is the most common way to get to work. Totally unsurprising if you've ever been to America, if you are an American, completely unsurprising. We prefer cars due to our lower density and also cultural preference for cars. So this topic has been beaten to death. So let me open the comments real quick, but I don't expect there to be anything interesting in this. Yeah, I guess it's worth noting that in Alaska, a lot of people walk to work. This is because actually in these really small northern settlements, it's so small that it's like you work a block away from your house usually. So, and then what is this other one? Taxi cab, motorcycle, or other means. So maybe that's I don't know, skiing, sledding, bicycling, maybe biking. I don't know. Or maybe all of the above. Maybe it's all rolled into one category. So yeah, you might live in the same. Yeah, exactly. So that is just because these towns are so small. It's like 100-person village, so they're gonna walk to work for the most part. But yeah, no, we drive here in America. LGBTQ plus free zones in Poland. So I'm not sure what that means, but I guess we'll find out. Maybe certain municipalities in Poland sort of like had a vote and declared themselves to be LGBTQ free or something. Galicia. I've never said this word out loud in English. Galicia? More like gay-lesia. Okay, so that was a terrible pun. LGBTQ ideology is banned here. LGBT gatherings are banned, but being gay is allowed. Okay, I guess. Nothing is banned here. Those zones are claimed by authorities that don't have any authority to implement such things. Tomorrow they might claim to be the kingdom of God, but from the legal standpoint. But what actually like happened? That's my question. Declaration passed by local provincial parliaments. Yeah, so, okay, that's kind of what I thought. It's just like some statement that was voted on by the local government or something. So, but nonetheless, this is interesting. I wish there was more, like for those of us who are not intimately familiar with Polish geography, I wish there was more context behind these red and black divisions. Like, you know, provincial boundaries or cities or something. What I do know is that this area is pretty much like, this area is extremely similar in both culture and language to Western Ukraine. It's almost like a single cultural region, sort of. So it's different in a way from the rest of Poland. And I actually talked about in a previous video, if you look at Polish election maps, it's a well-known phenomenon that you can see the outline of the German Empire. And this is a reflection actually of the fact that those areas that used to be part of the German Empire were, for the most part, at least in the cities, were settled by Germans. And again, I already talked about this. And those Germans were expelled after World War I and World War II. And what happened was you had a bunch of empty cities that were then settled by Polish people from the Soviet annexed part of former Poland, as well as other rural eastern territories. So the point is, the western part of Poland that was formerly part of the German Empire is settled by pretty much a random mix of different Polish regional cultures. And so there's actually a new Polish dialect, which is mixed linguistically. It doesn't have any particular feature. It's a mix of a bunch of different regional dialects. And so also the culture is sort of more liberal and Western oriented. I could speculate on the reason, but I can't say for sure what that reason is. But I know that the more pro-European, pro-Western, left-leaning political parties are more popular in the western part of Poland, and the eastern part of Poland is more popular with the conservative parties and the Catholic Church and other organizations like that. So, in other words, this division to me makes sense when I see this map. But what these little islands are and stuff like that, for example, that's that's something I'm not super clear about. But the new longest possible train journey in the world. Okay, so previously, I think the longest possible train journey was probably from, this looks like Faro in Portugal, Lisbon, going through Spain, through the Basque region to Paris, and then from Paris you take a train to Moscow. And I guess these are I was going to say, I thought each color was an individual train segment, so between colors you would have to switch trains, but I'm honestly wondering, is there direct rail service between Paris and Moscow? Because I know that in Belarus, they use the wide rail gauge, and then in Poland, they use standard gauge railways. So does that mean that they laid a standard gauge track all the way to Moscow? Or do you switch trains at the Belarusian border, or maybe in Warsaw or something like that? I don't know. But, okay, so you go from Paris to Moscow, and then you go from Moscow to, this looks like Yaroslavl or something, and then through to Perm and Yekaterinburg, and basically all this. This is the Trans-Siberian Railway now at this point. But then here, it splits off into the, I don't know how long this particular railway has been around, the one going through Mongolia, through the capital, Ulaanbaatar, and to Beijing. So that railway, I believe, was around for a long time. It was recently renovated as part of the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, by China. So what China did is they, and I guess Russia, this was kind of a shared project between China, Russia, and Mongolia. They electrified the railway and I believe made it double track, but I'm not totally sure. So that railway I think was around for a long time, probably since the 60s or something, but it was only recently expanded. So you can take a train to Beijing, and then in Beijing you take a new train all the way down to what looks like Kunming in southwestern China. And this is a brand new railway. So what previously did not exist, this light green segment here, from Kunming to Vientiane, the capital of Laos. And this also was built thanks to the Belt and Road Initiative. the idea was pretty much to create a railway corridor linking from Beijing to Singapore in the south. And that's exactly what China and the local governments did. So the Chinese funded this railway from Kunming to Vientiane. There was already a railway from Vientiane to Bangkok, and then from Bangkok south to Malaysia. There was some railway that was also built in Malaysia, although I'm not sure if it's this red segment or if it's unrelated. And then there's a railway going all the way to Singapore. So now you can go from southern Portugal, this looks like Faro again, I think is the city, Faro, all the way down, or Faru, all the way down to Singapore. So again, I think the previous longest train journey you could have taken was probably, so this is probably longest direct train journey, because otherwise you could just go in a squiggly line through Europe and stuff like that. So this is the longest direct train journey. I think before that you could probably go from Portugal to probably to Hong Kong or something, or at least Shenzhen or Guangzhou. You could also go to Vladivostok, which may or may not be longer. I don't know how that distance calculation works out, but this is cool. And so the main thing about this is the Belt and Road Initiative by China. As everybody knows, it's the Chinese government advertises it as an infrastructure program, but in reality, it's pretty much what's known as debt diplomacy. So a country like Laos is so poor that obviously they can't afford to build a train like that. So the Chinese government gives them a loan, and they, with favorable conditions. So Laos, maybe an interest-free loan. But the point is that now the government of Laos owes China, $10 billion or something like that, which of course is something that they will never be able to repay. And so forever now, China can hold this leverage over Laos. And a secondary benefit for China, of course, is that in the construction of these new railways and roads and other infrastructure, they use Chinese companies and Chinese labor. And currently in China, there's a problem where they're building highways that are not very useful. They're building houses that are completely empty, that are failing to sell. They're frantically building so much infrastructure that there's actually no need anymore, and there's no demand anymore for railways in China. So the Chinese railway companies are able to make good money by building these railways outside of China. And of course, these railways are more expensive to build than if they were being built within the country, because of transportation costs and probably, bureaucracy with the local authorities, probably various other hazards. And so you get to increase, the construction company gets to bill the Chinese government for even more than they normally would. So they get a lot of money. The Chinese government gets both goodwill, because everybody loves roads, everybody loves railways. So the people of Laos will think, oh, this is great because China is helping us develop. And meanwhile, the government of China gets leverage over the government of Laos. So it's a brilliant sort of scheme. And China is doing this pretty much all over the world except for Western Europe and the US. Those are the only countries that really won't allow things like this to happen. But so that was the story up until about 2018-ish, 2019. Right around then, a lot of countries began to notice the potential liabilities associated with taking on this huge amount of debt. And so in Malaysia, for example, a lot of projects were canceled. In, I think, Sri Lanka, so as governments become aware of this Chinese strategy, they become more skeptical of its benefits. So a lot of countries have actually ended up canceling their BRI projects. So I didn't mean to go on this rant, but I just thought it was something cool to explain that not a lot of people know. Okay, so let's keep going. Countries with a higher military strength ranking than Germany. So first of all, this is obviously BS. Anything that I mean, if you've been watching my videos, hopefully you're slowly developing like a spidey sense of when a map is bullshit versus when can be trusted. This map, this map cannot be trusted. As interesting as it is to compare different countries' militaries, it's just a nonsensical task. So let's analyze the map first a little bit, and then I'll criticize it some more. So the specific countries that have a higher military strength rating than Germany are the United States, Brazil, United Kingdom, France, Italy, Russia, Turkey, Egypt, Iran, Pakistan, India, China, South Korea, and finally Japan. So, does this make sense or not? Well, if you ask the question, is the military of the United States stronger than the military of Germany? The answer, of course, is yes. If you ask the question, is the French military stronger than the German military? Without knowing too much about the specifics of the troop sizes and things like that, I would still say probably yes. But when you start to compare countries like South Korea versus Germany, South Korea has a totally different mission than does the German military, right? The job of the South Korean military is originally it was to deter the communist threat coming from the north, so from North Korea, supported by China and the Soviet Union. But now, as things are shifting geopolitically, South Korea's role is increasingly to act basically as a outpost for the US-led alliance, sort of aligned against China. That's the function of the South Korean military. Now, China, Russia, and North Korea are all nuclear-armed states. North Korea, in particular, is extremely hostile toward the South Korean regime, and so South Korean men must undergo 2 years of military service. Of course, many people get exemptions, or many people get like easier jobs or desk jobs and things like that. But at least nominally, every Korean man is supposed to serve for 2 years in the military, which is quite a long time. It's similar to Israel. It used to be in the Soviet Union, men had to do 2 years, but gradually this has been reduced, and currently in Russia there is conscription, but it's only for 12 months. I believe, so Israel has, I want to say 2 years of conscription. Germany recently got rid of conscription. Norway has 8 months or 6 months or something, and I think Finland also might have that. I think I'll just put up a map of conscription. I'm sure that exists. So that's the goal of the South Korean military. The goal of South Korea is to have a population that's ready at any moment, basically, to defend against overwhelming numerical odds coming from USSR, China, and North Korea, as well as potentially nuclear weapons. Meanwhile, the German military, at this point in time, pretty much has no function. There's all sorts of Wikipedia articles that you can read about Western battle plans in case of a Soviet invasion. Even, I think it was called Operation Unthinkable or something, that was drawn up as when Churchill and Roosevelt realized that World War II was going to be won, and they also knew that the Soviet military was literally unstoppable, basically. Only nuclear weapons really could have done anything against the huge, at this point, well-armed and well-trained Soviet military, which was moving westward at a steady pace. So there's all sorts of battle plans devised against a Soviet attack. Now, of course, this is not a threat. Even the sort of most hawkish anti-Russia people would say that there is very little chance of Russia invading NATO, not even talking about the Baltic states, right? But reaching Germany, it's at this point virtual impossibility. Even now, as Russia is attempting to improve its military, it's still not in any sort of shape the way the Soviet military was as an offensive force to carry out huge ground operations on a large scale all the way through Eastern, Central, and Western Europe. So that threat no longer exists. So what is the function of the German military, at least as I see it? The function of the German military at this point, which by the way is very small, Germany spends a very small percentage of its GDP on its military. The function of the German military is pretty much to support the US presence in the area, similar to Korea, but unlike Korea, it's not there to deal with any kind of imminent threat of invasion. And so because of this difference in function, it's very hard to compare the two militaries. Germany has very skilled units and equipment and things like that, and so does South Korea. I think South Korea has more manpower, which maybe is why they have a higher military strength. You know, a better comparison might be Egypt versus Germany, or even Brazil. I mean, the Brazilian military, again, has an entirely different function, focused a lot on the Navy. Some Brazilian sort of nationalists, they want the Brazilian Navy to become more of a blue water Navy that can control sort of the Southern Ocean, the Southern Hemisphere. And I suppose, at least according to this map, Brazil is certainly the most powerful military in the Southern Hemisphere. So anyway, we could analyze this forever. I guess I don't want to spend more time on it, but at least in my opinion, this sort of map doesn't really make any sense because every military is specifically tailored for a particular country's situation. And unlike the situation of the US versus the USSR, where the two countries were staring each other down and America had a battle plan to fight against the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union had a battle plan to fight against the United States. So in this case, it actually made sense to compare the two militaries. But India is not going to be fighting Egypt anytime soon. So it doesn't really, there's no real way to accurately and fairly compare the strength of the two militaries, aside from just a very, very broad analysis of manpower and technology and preparedness and things like that. But nothing super precise. Okay, so I've said enough on this. Okay, most obese countries according to Harvard University. I like how they had to add that in there. Yeah, so this is, okay, so what this really is a map of countries where more than 30% of the population is obese. Those countries are Canada, United States, Mexico, UK, Ireland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Turkey, Libya, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Palestine, if you include, I don't know how that was counted. The Gulf countries, so Saudi Arabia, Oman, Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, South Africa, which is interesting, New Zealand, which amazingly they rescued from the very edge of the map. And I've been tempted to do this too because when formatting stuff like for social media, it has to be a certain format. And of course, that ends up usually cutting off New Zealand and some Pacific Islands. So interesting that they kind of managed to rescue New Zealand here. Although personally, I would have moved New Zealand at least like somewhere here, closer to Australia. But anyway, New Zealand and Australia. It is actually unfortunate that they didn't include certain Pacific islands because it is well known that in a lot of these islands, a very large portion of the population is overweight or obese. And this is for, I guess, cultural reasons. Back when it was actually difficult to become so large, it was, seen as a status symbol, somebody who had infinite amounts of food, basically. But nowadays, it's calories are so cheap that you could just drink soda all day and get enough calories to become quite obese. So it's no longer a challenge for people. So it's interesting kind of to see the overall trends. The one thing about these kind of maps that I've looked at these maps quite a lot because I think it's very interesting to compare between different countries, different continents, different cultures. But one of the things that we don't really account for in these maps is the age distribution. So Libya and Egypt have very, very young populations. So the median age in Egypt, if I'm not mistaken, is like 25 or younger, maybe even 22, something like that. In Libya, I think it was even younger, it might have been 20, 22 years old. So half the population was below the age of 20, which to me as a 25-year-old guy living in the United States, that's mind-blowing because it's actually not extremely common for me to see like young people, you know? I mean, they're there obviously, but imagine if literally every other person was a teenager or younger. That's just mind-blowing to me. But that's how it always was, and that's how it still is in some countries that are further, not as far along in their demographic transition. Egypt is very young, Libya is very young, South Africa is probably on the younger side. Australia, UK, and New Zealand are on the older side, so is Canada. And so being older puts you at a higher rate of being obese, usually, because of how hormones work, how growth works. When you're no longer growing and when certain hormonal changes take place in your body as you age, obviously it becomes easier and easier to put on additional weight. And so the point is that this is not quite an apples to apples comparison, because when you're comparing say Australia to a country like South Africa, you're going to run into this age effect. So taking into account the fact that South Africa is actually younger than Australia, all else equal, the obesity rate accounting for that is actually higher, right? Because if South Africa had Australia's age distribution, it would be quite a bit more obese than it already is. So that's something to think about. Let's look at the comments and see if there's anything more that can be said on this. So people are making fun of New Zealand. Yeah, Czech and Hungary, the Czech Republic has a big culture of beer, bread, and things like that, and very carbohydrate heavy diet. And I'm sure that contributes to the obesity situation. Kuwait is the fattest non-island country. Interesting. Okay. This might be old data because a study, 34% of Chileans are obese. Yeah, so I thought that too. I was actually a little surprised by but obese, I don't know, because overweight, if you had a map of countries where 30% or more people were overweight, that would be pretty much every single developed country at this point. So yeah, the binary is awful. So I mean, again, like it's much more interesting to just see like a color scale map of just the actual number. There's no need to arbitrarily slice it at 30%, you know, but whatever. So yeah, you're lumping together Japan with under 5%, with Sweden with over 20%. So let's look at the actual data, I suppose. So these are the Pacific Island countries that I was talking about: Nauru, Cook Islands, Palau, Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Tonga, Samoa, Kiribati, and so on, Micronesia. Kuwait is up there. USA is not quite number one, but in terms of large countries, no pun intended, it is number one. So, and then we have a bunch of Arabic countries, which I don't know what that's all about. Maybe it must be another cultural thing similar to Polynesia. I hate to say it, but there must be some kind of genetic component as well to this. So, because, well, okay, I don't know, but I shouldn't say genetic, I should say heritable, because it's clear that it depends on what your parents look like and what kind of family you grew up in and things like that. So it's certainly passed down, I think, from generation to generation, but I don't know if it's what the genetic aspect there is. So that is a separate research project. So again, we have a bunch of Arabic-speaking countries, and then we have New Zealand. I should say Turkey's not an Arabic-speaking country, but it's a Middle Eastern country, which borders a lot of Arabic-speaking countries. Australia, Malta, which is interesting. Malta is both old and speaks a Semitic language related to Arabic, and it's also very wealthy. So those three things, I'm sure, combined to make it not so great. Mexico, I was reading some news article or something about how Mexico's obesity rate overtook the United States, but I guess it depends on how you measure it. There's probably different ways of measuring it. There's different ways of adjusting for population. Obviously, Mexico has a younger population than the United States, so maybe the population adjusted obesity rate in Mexico is higher than that for the United States. So I don't know, but in Mexico, especially childhood obesity is a big problem. It has to have something to do with like sugar, just probably sugary drinks or something. I believe Mexico City or Mexico, someplace in Mexico was the first place to actually test a tax on sugary beverages. And that actually, it wasn't clear what the results were. Some people said it was a success, but then there was a reanalysis that said it didn't actually change anything because people switched from soda to beverages like milk and juice, which still contain relatively high amounts of sugar. So I don't know. There's the science is not, or the political science is not sort of clear on that one. But yeah, I thought Mexico would actually be higher. Maybe this is old data. This is 2016. Yeah, so. And the lowest countries are all Asia, Vietnam, Bangladesh. The rich countries are Japan, South Korea. Sri Lanka is fairly well off in terms of just people's availability to eat food. Let's see. It's interesting that they updated the flag of Afghanistan to the Taliban flag. I think that's kind of crazy. I suppose it reflects the de facto reality of the situation, but that's really interesting. Burkina Faso, Malawi, Singapore is quite rich. China, I suppose, is getting there, and that's pretty much it. I mean, most of these countries are not, people. There's definitely not an excess of, money to be spent on food in most of these places. So whether it's culture, genetics, whatever, that seems to be very important, for this variable. So, all right, so that is that, and let's see. Just want to let y'all know that my teacher used a map from here for class. I mean, that's hardly surprising, actually. MapPorn, back when I was active on MapPorn, this was like, 4 or 5 years ago or more. So when I posted things that got to the top of the subreddit and even got to the front page of Reddit, all sorts of people would reach out to me. Teachers, journalists, academics, people would direct message me or somehow find my email and stuff. And they would be like, hey, can I use this map in this or this project? So it's not surprising to me at all that there's a lot of, adults kind of lurking, whether it's teachers or if it's writers or scientists lurking on this subreddit. So no surprise there, to me at least. Where in Europe is a television license required? Wow. The one country that I did know it was required in was the UK. I know that you pay like a £50 or $50 fee or something like that annually, I believe, to which I think funds the BBC. But BBC is fully sort of operated by the British government, and those TV license fees actually go to fund that. So Ireland seems to also have that, which maybe they have something similar to the UK. Oftentimes they have similar institutions, so it makes sense. Another thing is, let's see, Denmark, pretty much all the Central European countries. I wonder, it's no surprise to me that the former communist countries don't have this. So what surprises me the most is former communist countries like Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, I guess even some of the former Yugoslav countries. These countries, for some reason, did actually establish a TV license. And my guess for this, okay, it's not even a guess. It's just like, in my mind, I'm thinking, where else have I seen this pattern of Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslav countries, along with Germany? And the only other time that I can recall seeing this pattern is Well, aside from occupied areas by Nazi Germany in World War II, right? Just due to physical proximity to Germany, there's also what was it? Okay. So this is really random, but if I'm going to put up a map of how to say platypus in different languages, and if you look at it, you'll see that there's in the 19th century in Europe, Germany had a very strong influence on science because of its research institutes, because of its famous achievements in science. And so a lot of these Eastern and Central European countries copied a lot of terminology and a lot of technology from Germany. So, and Russia is no exception. I mean, very many Russian scientific words actually come from German. Much of Russian science and Soviet science owes quite a bit to developments either in Germany or by Germans who moved to the Russian Empire, who acted as scientists there. So there's definitely a link in Russia as well, but it's not as strong, and it's really so there's the platypus map, but there's another map that I'm thinking of, which after I record this video, I'm going to try to find it. So Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia, those areas are heavily influenced by German culture, German science, and so on. And so it would not surprise me that after the fall of the Iron Curtain and so on, there was a move to imitate Germany because that's where they naturally looked to for examples of good government, of good how things should be done, etc. Now let's see if that makes any sense. Okay, so right off the bat, Romania seems to already be inaccurate. So there's a national TV and radio comes as an extra fee on the electric bill. So that's marked in orange here, similar to Italy, Greece, Turkey, and Portugal. Let's see. First time in my life I heard about a television license. In France, I don't think you can call it a license. It's a tax if you own a TV. Okay, so it's very similar. Turkey, we don't pay it, but we still pay a tax. So whenever we buy a TV, smartphone, or something that has a radio feature, they pay for. Okay, that's interesting. Which of course funds TRT, which is the Turkish network. Before Sweden made the license part of tax in 2019, there was a period where they tried to enforce it on every device with an internet connection. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so TV license is tough because it depends on how it's enforced and how it's implemented. And so apparently in Sweden and in Norway and in Romania, it's just an additional tax at the national level. So yeah, I don't know. One thing to add about Poland. Okay, so my theory here might be wrong about something to do with the collapse of communism. License fee is obligatory for both owning TV and radio, and in principle, it's not for watching, but simply for owning a TV or radio. It comes from a very old law, like from the 50s, and it's practically dead. You have to pay, but you don't have to let an official into your house to check if you own a set. By the way, I don't know if they still enforce it. So, okay, so it looks like in Poland, this was from the 1950s. So my theory about German influence might still be correct, but it seems to predate capitalism, at least. Japan has a TV license too for NHK. What do they mean by television license? Yeah, so, okay. So, slightly inaccurate map, yeah, but there it is. And of course, the Benelux countries bucking the trend. Interesting there as well. Countries with the most islands. Okay, this is really dumb. I guess, okay, I can be instructive here and explain why this is really dumb. So Sweden has 221,800 islands. Finland has 188,000 islands. Meanwhile, Canada only has 52,455 islands, despite being 20 times bigger than Finland and Sweden combined and having very similar climate, natural landforms, and so on. How could that possibly be? Or maybe the map is just wrong. So that's basically what this is. So what this really is just a map of how accurately each country has been mapped. So Sweden and Finland both being on the larger side in terms of European countries, but still relatively small. And these countries have very sort of Germanic. I know Finland is not Germanic, but they have a very sort of Germanic style thoroughness in how their government works, how they do national statistics and things like that. And so in Finland, the sort of geography service is actually quite a big deal, and I'm sure in Sweden as well. So Chile officially is supposed to have 43,471 islands, which is would place it between Canada and Indonesia on the map. So again, it depends on how you count things. Statista is one of those data aggregation sites that just pulls in data from a bunch of different sources without really checking actually how accurate it is. So Statista is really good if you need just some sort of data immediately, but if you're really looking for accurate stuff, you have to be really careful with Statista. You have to really look into what sources Statista uses. It's kind of like Wikipedia. If you really want to be thorough and make sure that what you're doing is correct, you have to check the original source, because Statista is not an original source. So again, the reason why Sweden, Finland, and Norway are leading here despite Canada being... I'm certain that Canada has the most islands of any country. But the reason Sweden and Finland are leading is because these are smaller countries which have been thoroughly mapped. I'm sure they've probably even been scanned with LiDAR or something like that. And so it's just an inconsistent comparison. If you compare the national official estimate for Sweden versus some random scientific paper that estimates the number for Canada and so on and so forth, it's just not going to be a fair comparison. A better way to do it would be to establish a consistent standard. For example, we're only going to use Landsat satellite imagery. We're going to apply the exact same machine learning algorithm to identify what's an island and what's not. Then that would be interesting. So if I was retired and had millions of dollars and a bunch of free time, that's the kind of study that maybe I would do just for fun. But time is money, and yeah, we are all limited here on this earth. Europe, protests 2020 through 2021. This is an animation, so let's play it. Peaceful protest with intervention, excessive force against protesters. I don't see any excessive force against protesters. Of course, excessive is kind of a subjective term. Belarus had protest. Okay, I just saw it flashed a little bit red. So Belarus had their protests. Moscow has been fairly quiet recently. Every so often there's a flare up of sort of liberal people gathering in Moscow and stuff, but and they make a big deal of the police reaction. But for the most part, people are maybe unfairly detained, but there's really not a lot of actual physical violence. I think I saw a red flash somewhere in Switzerland and maybe even Austria, so that's interesting. My question is, how many of these protests are protests against the coronavirus? And also, what's the difference between, that's stupid, protests against the lockdowns and sort of vaccine policy and things like that, because those have been kind of going under the radar lately. There are quite a few protests against the lockdowns in Europe that have been happening ever since 2020 and so on, when these things started. Yeah, and also, what's the difference between a protest and a rally, let's say? For example, let's say a bunch of people get together and rally for women's rights or for gay rights or something. Is that considered a protest because they're protesting a specific policy, or is there no specific policy? They're just trying to raise awareness. So it's there's no clear definition there. So this could be quite selectively chosen or inconsistently chosen. So anyway, plus it's at the end of the day, this pretty much just becomes a population map. It's just population and sampling error, sampling bias. That's the two things that this map is showing. All right, and the I'm getting kind of tired because it's actually late at night because this is the only time that I can record this thing. So, but this is gonna be the last one, and this is great. This is so wholesome. I made an ink map of the Grand Canyon. Yeah, so okay, this is let me get a straight on shot. There you go. So this is awesome. So the Grand Canyon, I've never been to the Grand Canyon still, and obviously definitely a place I want to go and experience that view, but man, this is, I really like it when people do hand-drawn maps. I love Anton, what's his name? The guy that made the huge hand-drawn map of North America. I think that's so beautiful and awesome, and when people really put a lot of time and effort to make a map really beautifully handcrafted, I think that's so amazing. There's also, this reminds me, not this specifically, but just other examples of maps that were made very painstakingly by people. There's sort of like an improved map of the United States. I forget who it's made by, but I'll find it after I record this video. Meticulously crafted. It was made by a guy who noticed certain sort of inconsistencies in, I believe, the National Geographic map of the U.S., the Rand McNally or whatever, a bunch of road atlases. He thought he could do better, and I think he did. It took him a ridiculous amount of time to do it, and nobody ever really compensated or paid him for it. So it was just purely a passion project. But there's also, that's another awesome example. The improved U.S. map or whatever. Great stuff, and huge respect for those people. So yeah, this is cool. And again, if I had been there, I would know what Phantom Ranch is and stuff like that, Grand Canyon Village, but unfortunately I do not have firsthand knowledge of this stuff. So all I can say for now is just it's beautiful and it's awesome, and I wish more people would do stuff like that. So, if you're watching this video and you're not sure whether or not to make a map or not, just do it. That's my message to you. Actually, that's how I, well, first of all, that's how I got started in general, but also even the Roman roads map, which I think still probably my most successful, most popular map, is something that I just wasn't even sure if I should release, because I made version 1, it looked kind of ugly. Well, it didn't work at all. Then I got back to it. I made version 2. That one was interesting, but it wasn't quite visually appealing in the way that I wanted it to be, eye candy for the masses, kind of. So version 3, and so I spent dozens of hours doing this in college back when I had more free time, I guess, and. The whole time, first of all, I had no idea how big it would get, and I had no idea, I had never made a transit map before. I had no experience making transit maps. I just kind of kept on iterating, kept on making it better and better, and ended up with something that I'm really proud of, and I think a lot of people got a lot of value and enjoyment from. So don't be scared, just do it. I mean, this doesn't apply to maps, this applies to literally everything. Just start small and just do it, and you'll be happy no matter what, even if it's not finished, or even if it's something that you just maybe abandon for a little bit and come back to, you'll be so glad. You'll be so glad that you started, because what else can we do in life? Hopefully this will help give a couple people that nudge just to create whatever it is they've been wanting to create but have been putting off for some time. And with that, I'm done. I'm tired, so that's going to be it for this week. My goal is still to keep doing these every single week. It's been tough lately with just various things coming up in my schedule, but one thing I can say for sure is that next week there will be a video, whether it's on Tuesday, Friday, Wednesday, I don't know, but there will be some sort of video. So stay tuned for next week.